Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're coming to you live from our living room. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about time. Megan and I have a lot of experiences, or quite a few, especially lately, with time. Wondering what time is it? Not necessarily on the clock or even on the calendar or what season we're living in, although those are all factors and things that we're thinking about. But in a very real way, right now we're meeting in our living room because the time has come for remodel at our church. So a new roof is being put on. They're pounding and going to town yesterday and today. Myself and Megan and some folks from the church, we've been remodeling the foyer, so it's a time for remodeling. So, and in our own lives, there's some seasons and times that have come to fruition. So right now it's a time of ministry. It's a time of growing the body of believers. It's a time where Megan and I are fairly newly married, and so we're learning about each other. We're learning how to blend a family. We're learning what it is to have faith blended with your family, faith blended with your marriage, faith blended in guiding your life. It's a time for faith. It's a time for growing. And in that time, it's a time of uncertainty. When we look at the news, we look at what's going on, there's some angst. You got the COVID going on. You got this nationwide pandemic. You got two very different schools of thoughts on it. And so what time is it? What time is it for you? Are you living in worry? Are you living in fear? Is it a time of being scared? Are you believing it's the end times? Or are you believing this is just the beginning? Is it a new season, a new time for you? Or is your time drawing near to the end? Whatever time it is, we want to have a little bit of time with you this morning as we just kind of discuss very freely and openly. There's no agenda that we have this morning on what God's doing in and through us and some things that have been in our hearts. So I'm going to let Meg kind of just talk about a time that she's been waiting for in her life that is now a part of her reality.
Yeah, so Jim and I were just talking this morning about, as he mentioned, different seasons, different times of our lives. And so I just wanted to kind of share what I've been waiting for. I think I've been waiting, I guess, 6 years or so, 5 years, for the perfect therapy job to open for me. So in my experience as an occupational therapist and just therapy in general, I have always wanted to work at the hospital. And I really haven't got that opportunity to be full-time in a hospital and have that perfect job, so to speak, for me to come open until last week.
In our town.
In our town.
Yeah.
So I am used to having to put two part-time jobs together, or maybe a PRN job with a part-time job to try to make full-time hours. And so I'm just super excited. I'm so thankful that God has given me the opportunity to work full-time in occupational therapy in Watertown.
Amen to that.
At a hospital. And
Yes.
so just as we're talking different seasons and time, I'm just so incredibly thankful for the patience that I had to have. This is like 5 years in the making for me, of being patient enough to kind of go through different seasons and have to take different therapy jobs as I saw, fit for me at the time. And so I'm just so excited for this new chapter. We're excited for this new chapter, this journey that we're about to go down. Jim and I get to do hopefully some work together since we're both working at the hospital. So we're both going to be able to, if we have a patient in the same town, we can travel together, which has never happened before. We're going to be able to just really step into our roles as, Jim as a chaplain and a pastor, and me as a therapist. And so we're excited for this time, for this season. And so we couldn't be more thankful for what God has done and just putting that patience inside me. This has taken a lot of patience and a lot of frustration, but I've really had to just dig deeper into God and into my faith, and just to know that it's on God's timing and not my own. And so I really feel like if I would have forced something, or if I would have tried to push my way, into a therapy job too soon, then I wouldn't be blessed with the therapy job I have now. I would, probably be trying to work part-time in a few different places, or maybe full-time, but I'm traveling all the time. And so this has really been awesome for us. We're just incredibly blessed for this.
Yeah, we talk about times, and we want things to be on our own time. I know I do. I often try to piecemeal different things together apart from God's plan, just thinking, well, I know better, or I know right, and we need to hurry up with this. And I know Megan's done the same. We've done the same together and apart. And so in this last season of our life, or this time of our life, it was Megan being home. This was something that Megan hadn't planned on, or I hadn't planned on, but because of COVID and some other circumstances in our lives, Megan spent the last 6 months at home. And so this has been homeschooling kids. This has been being a huge help and partner with me in really launching this ministry. It has been just a collision, really, of grace, which has kind of been our last series that we'll pick back up on. But it has been incredible to be in this time. But it has been a time of somewhat of impatience, because we're kind of wondering, finances are getting tighter and tighter. We're wondering, okay, what's the next thing? And we're really spread pretty thin. And so this was a huge answer to prayer, and it took, even when we found out it was probably going to happen, it took another month of patience, and Megan was constantly like, Jim, you heard anything there on your end? Hey, have you, and I got to say, Megan and I prayed to be able to do ministry together, to be able to do life together, parent, and all the things that we get to do together. And we wanted a time like this, and there's been times where we have, as Megan said, pieced it together, and it just hasn't worked, because we've tried doing it our own strength, in our own way, and I'm not kidding you, every single time it's failed. Well, now this looks different than what maybe we imagined, but it's better than what we imagined in this time. The other thing that's been kind of significant about this time, we have a transition personally. It'll be a transition a little bit financially. It'll be a transition for our family. The kids are back in school. Megan's at work full time. I'm working a couple jobs full time. We're really seeing what God has in store for this. Well, part of my role as chaplain and pastor is, especially as chaplain for hospice, is seeing people at the end of their life. So I make a visit, I make daily visits with people who are dying, who are sick and dying. And it's really amazing to see in their time of life what's important. The stuff, the newest car, the nicest house, the best furniture, the best decorations, that next step on the corporate ladder. All of a sudden, those things aren't so important. What's important when people that are dying? And this is exclusively 100% across the board. 100% it's family and relationships. And almost 100% here in the Midwest, it's God and it's faith. People that have even been opposed to faith before, or said, no, I'm going to brush God off. All of a sudden, when you're faced with eternity and you're faced with death, you wonder what is next. And again, most people are not so much scared of what is next, especially if they have faith. They're knowing they're going to be home with Jesus. They know that they have a forever home. But it's this process of dying. It's this fear of unknown. It's trusting in this time, in this season. And so I have the privilege of walking with a lot of folks as they die, holding their hands, being around the bedside with their families. And I've had this privilege the last 2 days to perform a couple funerals. One I did yesterday, and I have one coming up this afternoon. And both of these funerals really have made me reflect on time. And I've shared that with Megan. And as I talked about time with a dear friend that passed away yesterday, who he really had become a dear friend, and as I shared with his family and his friends, and as we had a service honoring his life and the legacy that he had built, we shared about time. And so I wanted to share a little passage out of Ecclesiastes, which we're all familiar with, I believe, or most of us are. And it's often read at funerals, but I would encourage you to think beyond a funeral, or beyond this idea of just mourning, and what it is to dance, what it is to live life fully. And so here's what Ecclesiastes says, the 3rd chapter, and a few verses here. There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What time is it for you in your life? What season are you going through? Are you prepared for the times that we're living in and the times yet to come? What about the times of eternity? Have you set your hearts on the things that really matter? Are your priorities your faith and your family? The only things that you can leave behind, and the only things that you can take with you? Nothing else you can do in this time. You know, it's interesting, Solomon wrote that passage of Scripture, and how key and how well worded and penned were those words 2,000 some years ago, and how fitting they are today. Is it a time for war or a time for peace? Is it a time to mourn or is it a time to dance? You know, Megan's been showing me some dance moves, and she's a lot better dancer than I am. Shocking for most of you, yeah. Yeah, and so Megan, your experience with me dancing, that's a good time?
Oh, yes.
Your feet never hurt afterwards?
No.
No. So we're preparing for this barn service next Sunday, a dance on Saturday night, a service in the barn at our friend's place on Sunday morning, and then a threshing show and kind of a outdoor experience, we could say, on Monday, on Labor Day. Another time or a season that we're preparing for. And so, but back to, remembering this time and that there's really a season for everything. A time to be born and a time to die. Okay, so just in that one sentence, that kind of sums up life. There's a time to be born and a time to die. One sentence, that's it. And we have this one dash between the date we're born and the time we die. What are we going to do with it? What are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your resources? What are you doing with your faith? What are you doing with your family? What season are you in right now? We know that we are all creatures of time by the way we set our clocks and watches, or how we look at our phones, right? We know that we have schedules and appointments set by dates on our calendars. Megan loves her planner, or planners, and she has many dates and events set on that planner, on the calendar. And I'm sure many of you are the same. In fact, Megan's looking for a new planner now. God help us. We know larger amounts of time are measured by months and years. Then we know in life that generally we have seasons. We know them as spring, summer, winter, and fall. And right now we're about to hit fall. Megan, do you like that season?
That's my favorite.
What do you like about fall, Megan?
Well, a lot of it is the crispness of the air. I get to wear a sweatshirt.
Did you say the Christmas of air?
Crispness.
Crispness. You heard that. It's not Christmas, it's crispness.
It's colder outside.
Okay.
And so, we come out of summer and it's like really warm all the time. We live in South Dakota on this side of the state. It's really humid. It's really hot. And so the last couple of days, honestly, it's been like 65, 70-ish.
Yep.
And I've had a sweatshirt on or jeans on and a sweatshirt. And people are still, in shorts and t-shirts and whatever. But I am just so ready for fall. I love just being able to have bonfires outside when it's colder out.
Yes.
I love being able to put on a sweatshirt and pants again. And, of course, the pumpkin spice lattes that Jim doesn't like.
Yuck.
Plaid. I love plaid.
Oh, yes.
So our plaid stuff starts coming out again in the fall. And so it's just the leaves changing and everything. It's by far my favorite season.
Wait, honey. My plaid stuff never went away.
He wears plaid all the time.
I'm not wearing plaid today.
Except today.
Yeah. So that season we're excited about. We're excited about fall and the crispness of the air. Crispness. I don't know if that's a word. But we are excited for it. We're excited for this season we're on. We're excited for our church. We're excited for all of you to be a part of our body and just part of the body of Christ and what's going on. We're excited for this season in our family and having all the kids back to school. Yes. But we're excited. So even as excited or as maybe as sad as the people that we've ministered to these last couple of days, that we will in these funerals, and they've had a season or a time of mourning and of loss. And again, I ask you, what time are you living in, or what season are you living in? And as important as all these seasons, these times are, I would wonder if perhaps time should be measured more than hours, or measured more than just with time or with calendars or with seasons. maybe time should be measured by relationships. Couldn't relationships be a measurement of time that we use? Or couldn't that be the most important thing? Isn't that the most important thing?
Yeah.
That's what I find out is the most important thing as I minister to those who are sick and dying. Which, by the way, death has always kind of been this number one fear of mine. And how many of you told God no? Well, I told God, hey, I'm so excited to go into the ministry. I love it. I don't want to deal with death. And I don't want to deal with people dying because it just seems like it would be too sad and I don't think I could take it. And God opened up a job for me to be a chaplain with hospice. And I'm like, Lord, this seems kind of crazy. And Megan's like, no, this is your time. You need to step out in faith. So we did that. And I tell you what, I gained far more from those on hospice who are dying than I could ever minister back to them. In fact, this last gentleman I did the funeral for yesterday, 3 months ago, he surrendered his life to Jesus. There was a great time of celebration, and now he's in heaven with his Lord and Savior. And whether you're 10 years old or you're 90 years old, it is never too late. Your time to have a relationship with Christ isn't yesterday, and it isn't tomorrow. It's now. Now is your time to have a relationship with Jesus. I guarantee it'll be the best decision you ever made. That was the best decision this gentleman made. I see people make this. It's the best choice I've made. I know that Megan's made. And it's a continual choice that we all need to make to be in that time. But again, I think this time or the season that we choose, the more important thing is the relationships in that time or in that season. I think that's really what our lives should be measured by. So again, let me just ask you, what season are you living in? What is important in your life? Megan, what's something that's important in your life? Maybe share what was important in your life before Jesus and what's important in your life now. Have your priorities switched, do you think?
Yes.
So what's that look like for you?
I mean, it looks 100% different. So before I knew Jesus, my important things, or the things that I held a lot of value in, were success, money, how many people would like me, or people that liked me. So I was interested in, being a people pleaser, making sure that, people would enjoy being around me, or making sure that I did enough. So that was before Jesus. And now that I know Jesus, my priorities are my faith, my relationship with God, my family, my husband, my kids, my extended family, and just really being a light to others, and using my job as a therapist to be able to share that light, and just share those experiences with our kids. I didn't understand how important it was to be vulnerable in front of children, because I thought, oh my gosh, as parents, we have to be super strong, and you can't ever show them that you cry, and you can't ever have these emotions in front of them. And I think what we've learned, and what's important to me, is just that vulnerability and sharing my failures. Before Jesus, I had a lot of pride, and sharing my failures wasn't something I liked doing. I didn't like to admit my mistakes and what I did wrong, and now we've really been able to. I've been able to share my failures with Jim, with our kids, and other people, and just being vulnerable with that.
Let me pause, Megan, right there. I just want to add something in that time or that season that we're living in now, but this season of being a Christian, which is a forever season, a forever choice. In that season, would you say that now that we're Christians, or that I'm a pastor and you're a pastor's wife and we're in ministry, does that make us perfect?
No.
Do we ever have struggles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do.
Is it just like fairyland around our house?
No.
Is there ever yelling?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Do the kids smack on each other once in a while?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there ever disagreements between you and I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes wind up on the couch?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So being a Christian, that doesn't make us perfect?
No.
No. Okay. But it does make us have a capacity to know that there's something greater beyond ourselves out there, and that really that verse, that Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many, that we can model that then, and we can try to have this attitude of forgiveness and servanthood with one another.
Right.
And that we should be quick to forgive, and it's not about all what I want or what you want, but it's about coming together, and so we grow in that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that imperfectness and sharing, being able to be vulnerable. this is something that's been hard for both of us. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, we both wanted to have this picture perfect life, and really made sure we wanted to make sure the outside world knew us as having it all together, even if inside we were crumbling, even to the extent of our children.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'd like to highlight just one of our kids, and that's Jaden, our oldest and only daughter. And for any of you who know our story, Megan's not Jaden's biological mom, but she is most definitely her mom. And so through Megan being able to be vulnerable, if you could talk to us a little bit about how that has impacted your life, Jaden's, and really both of yours in the light of the kingdom, and how that's changed kind of before Jesus and trying to keep it all maybe surface level, or like you had it all together, and then sharing with Jaden some of your failures, shortcomings, and heartache. What did that do for your relationship?
That did a lot for Jaden and me, actually, really, because in the process I was learning how to be vulnerable and how to be able to share my failures with others. And so Jaden had kind of a tough summer last summer. It was kind of rough. And so I remember one experience with her. She was in the ER, and I was able to go in there, and I remember her saying that I was the only one that she would let in. That she didn't want anyone else in the ER with her. She wouldn't let anyone in the room. And so I was really able to go in there with her, and I'll never forget this moment because it was incredibly powerful for both of us. But she was crying, and she was a mess, and she was scared, and I think felt really isolated and lonely. And I felt those things multiple times in my life. And so I really was just able to open up to her and, just share the past things that I have failed in. And so she eventually, when I shared enough things about what I've done wrong, I've messed up in this area when I was your age, I did this when I was your age, because I think she had this picture of me like, oh, Megan's not done anything bad. Megan's never done anything wrong. Well, that's not true. And so I was able to share with her the things that I have done wrong at her age, especially, so that I could get on her level and so that she could really feel comfortable in opening up to me.
It made it human. I mean,
right.
You're human, you're not perfect, there's mistakes, and
yep.
There was times in your life that we're not all happy.
Yeah, I was able to really just take myself back to 15 and think about, well, what did I do wrong at 15? And how did I act at 15? At 15, I was selfish. I was a teenager, obviously. The world was about me and what I wanted. And I think, a majority of teenagers are like that, and that's just part of being a teen. But I was able to share with her, everything was about me, and everything was about what I wanted to do, and how much trouble that ended up getting me in. And, I ended up fighting with my mom a lot because of it. I ended up not respecting my parents because of it. I ended up just in this kind of defiant state. And so I was really able to just be honest with her. And that allowed her to open up to me and share, she was able to share a lot of deep stuff that was on her heart. And I feel like it had been on her heart for a while. She just didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
And so that experience really solidified our bond.
And that bond's continued to grow, right?
Yeah,
and you're still someone that Jaden can come to, and the relationship is healthier because your relationship with Jesus exists and is getting healthier. And when your vertical relationship is getting better, when your relationship with God is getting better, your horizontal relationships, your relationship with your spouse, with your children, grandchildren, friends, whomever, will get better, right?
Yep.
It'll be easier to see them as imperfect, and it'll be easier to recognize that relationships, as in all seasons and times, are important at all times, right? Yeah.
So it was great. Our bond is still strong. She's still able to come. I think because of that exact experience that we had in the ER, she's still able to come to me and share things with me openly. And I'm thankful for that. I do let her know, if this is something you don't want me to tell anyone, then, or your dad or anybody else, then tell me that and say, hey, I'm just telling you this. I don't want anyone else to know. And that's something that I keep between her and I. So really just that bond is incredibly strong because I was able to open up and just be a human in front of her, not, just completely taking myself out of the stepmom role in the parenting role, and I was able to just be a human.
A Christian.
So
Yeah, really living the gospel out and knowing that even in our imperfectness, it's really in our imperfectness. It's in these valley low times. It's maybe when, just like my hospice folks and their families, when they're going through this valley low time, when they're mourning the loss of someone that they have loved and known all their life, their dad, their grandpa, their mom, their grandma, whomever it might be, there's seeds that can come out of that. So in our teenage years, and most of us have had these experiences which aren't exactly positive, or we've been defiant to our parents or to authority figures, or we've got ourselves in trouble, or we've just been at a very low place ourselves, and maybe this has been in other times in our life because of loss. God can really use those and cultivate them if only we'll let him. If we'll surrender to the most important thing, which is our relationship with Christ, then we can be more honest and vulnerable with our kids. And even as a Christian, as a pastor, sometimes, and as a man, for me, it's hard to admit when I have a shortcoming or a failure. It's hard for me to be vulnerable with the person I'm the closest to, which is Megan, our most human person anyway. And so in these last months, probably about 7 months ago, I really had to get extremely vulnerable, raw, and honest with my wife and also with my children. So I won't go into as much detail as Megan did, but with the boys especially, I had to sit down with them, especially my oldest son, who's a lot like me. He's a really amazing kid, and he makes really good choices most of the time. But like me, and he's better than what I was that age, by the way, way better. So when I say like me, I'm saying that in a more of a negative sense. He's got this sense of pride, and I would say that's his biggest shortcoming, and it's definitely my biggest shortcoming. He has a little more righteousness probably behind it because he has really tried to live his life in a way that honors God, that honors the Word, and so his pride doesn't come out in unrighteousness or unkindness. I mean, when Jimmy has friends over, they are of all different sizes, shapes, colors, backgrounds. He is not at all prideful in that way. It's this idea of being right and wrong. He hates being wrong. And oftentimes, truthfully, which is between you and I would never tell him he's often right. But we don't want his head to get any bigger than it already is. And so I often have been in that same place where I don't want to be wrong. And even in being right, what I've learned lately, you can still be wrong in how you approach. I've done that with Megan. I've argued about such stupid things to prove a point that I'm right. In the end, I have proven that I was right. And I've crushed Megan in the meantime, or my kids, and or those that I'm close to, and made them feel terrible, small, belittled, and to prove a point that I was right. So in the end of it, I was right, but I was extremely wrong. And it's in that vulnerability, in that time, that I've been able to share with Jimmy and the other boys, and Jaden and Megan, all of them, this sense. But I guess the point of it is, all this, you're like, well, I thought you were talking about time, and now you're kind of getting to this. Well, if you know me, it's bunny trail after bunny trail, and eventually it may or may not come around. So, but it is a time to give your lives to Jesus. If you've already given them, it's time to grow in that relationship. I need to grow more. Okay, I've overcommitted myself to a point where I've got to make some changes, and we've got to make some changes, or some things are going to start going down, including my relationship with God, my relationship with my wife and my kids. I've gotten to a point as a pastor, as a chaplain, where with the right motive and heart, I've said, yes, I'll do this, and yes, I'll do this, and yes, I'll do this, and yes, I'll do this. And I'm to a point where I've said so many yeses that I'm in a time in my life where I need to slow down. And so Megan's reminded me of that. The kids reminded me of that. And so we're working on this season, this time. But no matter what time it is in my life, no matter what season, I want to be remembered, or I want it to be characterized by people. I want to be characterized by relationships with God first, with Megan, with our children. And I want that to be known, not just on a video or not when I'm preaching, but to Megan. I want her to know that's my priority. I want the kids to know that. And so I slip down and I fall, and I want to be cognizant of that. But I'll be real and raw the whole time. Okay? I want to try to be more vulnerable and more open. I want to do that with my church body, with my friends here watching, and I want to do that with those closest to me, and even those on hospice. So we won't keep you much longer today. We just wanted to encourage you that there is a time and a season for everything. There is a time to mourn, and that's okay. It's healthy, and it's good. You should mourn when you have a loss. And there's also a time to dance. Come dance with us this Saturday and see my moves at the barn, by the way.
You won't
that's by Clear Lake.
I'll tell you that right now.
But there is a time for everything in your life. So I would just encourage you in every season, fall, pumpkin spice, buffalo plaid, whatever's going on in that time, please please focus on what's really important, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So thanks for joining us today, Megan. If you've got any final words, we love you, and we love being able to minister and just be a part of what God's doing in Clear Lake at the church, and in Watertown, and as a whole, as a body of believers.
I don't think I have anything else.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Have a great Sunday.
Thank you, guys.